رب اشرح لي صدري. Oh Allah, open up my heart and my mind to receive the information that I'm about to gain. ويسر لي أمري, and ease my affairs. واحلل عقدة من لساني, and untie the knots in my tongue. يفقه قولي, so that they may understand what I'm about to say. ربي أرني الحق حقا فأتبعه. Oh Allah, let me see the truth as a truth so that I may follow it. والباطل باطلا فأجتنبه. And falsehood is falsehood so that I may avoid it. ولا تجعله متشابها علي. And don't let there be a confusion between the two. فأتبع هواي بغير علم, lest I follow my whims without even realizing it. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala states in the chapter of Fussilat, verse number 53, He says, سَنُرِيهِمْ آيَاتِنَا فِي الْآثَاقِ وَفِي أَنفُسِهِمْ. We will show them our signs in the horizons and within themselves. حَتَّى يَتَبَيَّنَ لَهُمْ أَنَّهُ الْحَقِّ. Until it becomes clear to them that He, Allah Almighty, is the truth. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أَوَلَمْ يَكْفِ بِرَبِّكَ أَنَّهُ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدِيرٌ. Is it not أَنَّهُ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ شَهِيدٌ عفوا. And then He says, is it not enough for them that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala witnesses all things? صدق الله العلي العظيم. آمنا بالله. Brothers and sisters, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So in the last few nights we've been going over really important facts that affect our lives, right? We were able to prove the existence of a creator by saying that the creator of something is greater than what they create. Any creator is greater than what they create. We took that universal concept, we applied it to the creator of all things limited, and we said, since the creator of something is greater than what he creates, then the creator of all of limitation is greater than limitation. Therefore, he must be unlimited. And then from there we said that means that he doesn't have a beginning and doesn't have an end, because a beginning is a limit and an end is a limit, right? So that means he always existed and will always exist. We said that also means that he doesn't have any flaws, because flaws are limits, right? And therefore he is flawless, which means that he's all perfect. And that also means that he doesn't make any errors. There's no contradictions in anything that he is going to tell us or ask of us. And also, since he's all perfect, that means he's all purposeful, which means I have a purpose, right? Everything that Allah creates has a purpose. It also means that he is all wise and all knowing. It also means that he is all just, which means that he doesn't oppress, not even a quark's worth, not even an atom's worth. Why? Because he's all perfect. So based on that then, we said, all right, what else can we uncover or discover from this discourse? So we were able to determine as well that since the Creator is all perfect and He chose for each and every one of us to exist, that means that we're very worthy of existing, right? And we said that our greatest purpose then would be to first and foremost know Him. And once we realize the Creator, the unlimited, that He chose for us to exist, then just like we would want to please our parents who brought us into this world, fed us, taught us how to walk, guided us, sheltered us, that we would want to please Allah Almighty, our Creator, even more than we would want to please our parents. We would want to make Him even more proud than we would want to make our parents proud, right? Why? Because He gave us our parents and our grandparents and the very air that we breathe, and the very ability to breathe, and the very ability to be able to rationalize, intellectualize, and realize His existence in our lives. And so, once I come to that realization, we said, you end up with a paradigm shift, because you realize truly you're in the presence of greatness, right? With every breath you take, you're in the presence of greatness. With every step that you take, you're in the presence of greatness. Once you let that realization infiltrate your intellect and you start to make decisions in your life, you start to realize that, you know what? My greatest purpose in life is to take everything that Allah has given me and to dedicate it solely to Him, right? To pleasing Him. So whether it's my vision or my hearing or my very heart, right? Or where I reach or where I walk, everything has to be dedicated to Allah. I see Allah before all things and after all things and to the sides of all things and under and over and within all things. Why did Amir al-Mu'mineen say this? He said this because it's an expression of Tawheed. It's an expression that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is unlimited, and that when we make decisions in our lives, we have to always keep the Almighty Creator in our mind, right? that does this please my Creator or not? What I'm about to do, the decision that I'm about to make, does this please my Creator or not? It also allows me to understand the intrinsic value that every single creation has. And so when I look at everyone, now I see them with the value that Allah has given them. That's another paradigm shift that I have, right? And so what happens is I'm going to see, the insects as beautiful creations that have a purpose. I'm going to see animals as beautiful creations that have a purpose. I'm going to see all of mankind as worthy of existing, purposeful existence. And I would want to get to know them, right? I would see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, how He treats everyone, and I would treat them the same. Allah is tolerant of us, no matter how much we transgress. Whether we realize His existence or not, He still gives us opportunity, right? To breathe, to talk, to communicate, right? To thrive, to prosper. And so I would want to do the same for all of Allah's creations, to provide them the venue to be able to thrive and do well in their lives, right? I would become a steward of this universe, right? I would want to be eco-friendly. I would want to recycle. And I would encourage others to do the same. I become extremely socially aware and socially responsible, right? Just from discovering and uncovering this beautiful realization that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is unlimited. So we went through a few other things. We talked about trials and tribulations. Those who weren't here, you can always review that. We said trials and tribulations are of two types, from God or from our own decisions. We said decisions are good because nobody likes to be compelled to do anything. And therefore, since God is all perfect, then He has to give me choice, right? Otherwise, He would be forcing me, and that would be cruel. And therefore, He would have to give me choice. Even the choice to choose Him, right? And that's what we spoke about yesterday. Again, those who weren't here yesterday or the days before, you can go online to the Imam Ali Center YouTube channel, and you can, inshallah, watch those videos. You can also go to the Knowledge Seekers 14 YouTube channel. I have them in bite sizes for those who don't have a lot of time to listen to a half-hour lecture. Okay? They're in like 5 to 10 minute morsels for you. All right? Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So I promised you today, we said that we got to a point where we said the second way of determining our purpose is to ask our Creator, what is it, oh Allah, that you want from me? And we said there has to be a necessity, a logical necessity for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to communicate with me with some sort of message, right? And we said that that message has to have or has to be a reflection of its author, right? Just like if I were to write a paper or write a book, the style, right, characterizes the author. Yes? So then based on that, I look at the characteristics of the Creator and I say, all right, well, how can His characteristics help me decipher which message is truly from God? Now we have 3 faith denominations that claim that they have the Book of God, right? We have our brothers and sisters from the Jewish faith. We have our brothers and sisters from the Christian faith. We have our brothers and sisters from the Muslim faith, right? So the Jews have the Torah, the Christians have the Holy Bible, and the Muslims have the Holy Quran. Okay, good, alhamdulillah. All right, so the next thing that we have to do is we have to say, okay, well, in order for me to determine whether a message is truly from God or not, what I have to do is I have to put together some criteria, right? The first 2 criteria that we mentioned yesterday, we said, are based on the characteristics of Allah. And we said the most important characteristic is that He is unlimited. Ahsan, Brother Muhsin. Okay? Now, the first criterion, specifically, since God is unlimited, then that means He is unchanged and constant. Therefore, His message must be unchanged and constant over the span of time. Right? That's number 1. That's the first criterion. Second criterion is, we said, since God is unlimited, that means He's all perfect. Right? And therefore, He doesn't make any errors. He doesn't mince words. Right? There are no contradictions in anything that He does or says. Therefore, His message must not have any contradictions. Yes? Agreed? Good. So that's the second criterion. The third criterion, we said, has to be that the message has information in it that corrects false claims that are made by scholars of past religions or by atheists or by disbelievers. Okay? The fourth criterion, we said, is that it has to have information about the universe that nobody would know except for the Creator Himself. Got it, Muhammad? Yes? Okay. And then we said, finally, the fifth criterion is that it has to be a miraculous message. Why? Because the Creator is beyond nature, which means He's supernatural. And therefore, His message has to be beyond nature, meaning supernatural. Okay? Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Now, let's analyze the scriptures that we have before us. Okay? So, let's learn a little about each scripture, and then let's start applying the criteria to them. Now, when we look at the Torah, today we find the Torah itself doesn't exist. Okay, so it was lost ages ago. However, what is used is what's called the Jewish Bible, and the Jewish Bible is the Old Testament of the Holy Quran. Of course, of the Holy Bible. Now, they also have, of course, you know, the Talmud, and they have books of law, but the original Torah doesn't exist today. All right. So we can't say that it's constant and unchanged because we don't have it in our hands today. What we do have is the Old Testament, and we'll take a look at that in a few minutes. So that's when it comes to the Torah. So the first criterion, based on the fact that the Torah doesn't exist, the Torah doesn't meet the first criterion because we don't have it today. Okay? Now, if we look at the Holy Bible, since now we're focusing on, let's say, the Jewish Bible as well as the Holy Bible. We said the Holy Bible is composed of the Old Testament and the New Testament. Now, the Old Testament is what? Is the Jewish Bible. Okay? That's what it's called. The Bible itself is composed of many Gospels. Some of the Gospels have been removed, okay? Based on certain conferences that occurred, decisions were made to remove certain Gospels. But the current Bible that we have has a certain number of Gospels in it, okay? Whether it's the Old Testament or the New Testament. Now, does anybody know, the Bible that we have in our hands today, was it written during the time of Jesus? No, it wasn't, okay? So according to historians and scholars of biblical scholars, they say that it was written about 40 years after the death of Jesus alayhi salam. But in order for us to have the whole Bible that we have today, you'll find that it took 1,500 to 1,600 years to compile the modern Gospels that exist today, that we have today. Okay? So now, do we know the authors of these Gospels? Let's say, to be conservative, about 85% of the authors of the Gospels, we don't know. So if you ask any preacher, any reverend, any bishop, you take any course, okay, in any university, in the School of Divinity, they will tell you that, you know, there are many of the authors, about 85% of the authors of the Gospels of the Bible that we don't know. Okay? Some we do know. We know Matthew, we know Luke, we know John, right? But there are many that we don't know, all right? So then this kind of tells us that, okay, well, if I don't know who authored something, then how do I know if they're trustworthy or not? That creates an issue for us, okay? Also, there's going to be different writing styles, right? Because just like Faisal has a different writing style than I do, and Yasin has a different writing style than I do, and Muqsid has a different writing style than I do, and Brother Muhammad has a different writing style than I do, then we're going to see a difference in the styles, right? So we'll talk about that. That issue means that there's a lack of stability, so there's going to be a little bit of discrepancy. Also, we don't know who the author is. Now, what about the original Bible? Because we as Muslims believe that Prophet Jesus was a Rasul as well, that he was a messenger, which means he had a message, right, to deliver to his people. So, do we have the original Bible? And in what language was the original Bible revealed? Some tell you that the original Bible was revealed in Aramaic, because that was the language of the time. Others tell you that the original Bible was revealed in Hebrew. Whether it's Aramaic or Hebrew, really is non-consequential. Why? Because we don't have the original Bible today. And this is part of the problem, okay? We don't have the original Bible today. So what do? So we have to look at the current Bible or the latest Bible, the oldest Bible available. What's the oldest Bible? There are two. One is called the Septuagint and one is called the Vulgata. Okay? One is a Greek translation of the original Bible. One is supposed to be a Latin translation. Okay? Now, some say that the Hebrew Bible was, not the Old Testament, but the Hebrew Bible was translated from the Vulgata. All right? This is an opinion. So the point is, though, we don't have the original Bible. What do we have? We have translations and we have compilations of Gospels that now are called the Old Testament and the New Testament. Which means then that if I look at the author, I'm not going to have one author now of the Bible. I have multiple authors, which means I'm going to have multiple styles, which means that it's not going to be constant, right? Especially when we also have Gospels that are missing or that have been removed, right? So then the Bible does not then pass that first criterion as well. Or even the Old Testament as being called the Jewish Bible. Now, what about the Holy Quran? The Holy Quran was revealed 1400 years ago in the Arabic language. It was written in the Arabic language. There were many scribes during the time of the Holy Prophet, including Ali ibn Abi Talib salamullahi alayhi, right? Today, if you compare a Bible from today to the Bible the Holy Quran from today to the Holy Quran 1400 years ago, right? 800 years ago, 600, 400, 200, 100, 50 years ago, 25 years ago, 5 years ago, to this very day, whether you're in China or whether you're in the US, whether you're in Scandinavia, one of the Scandinavian countries like Sweden, Finland, Norway, okay, or whether you're in Southern Africa, okay, or Western Africa, or Eastern Africa, or Northern Africa, or in Russia, wherever you may be, the Quran is exactly in the same Arabic. Exactly in the same Arabic. Down to the short vowel, meaning al-harakat, the fatha, dhamma, kasra, right? Unchanged. All the verses exactly the same, all the chapters exactly the same, exactly where everything is. What you will see is that older fonts and older qara'in were used, and older Qur'ans were used, okay? So instead of, for example, using the current Uthman Taha font, you might have had a Kufi font, for example, okay? But the chapters are all the same, the verses are all the same, everything's exactly where, you know, we see it today, right? Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So far then, we have only the Holy Quran that passed the first criterion in terms of consistency and in terms of it being constant and unchanged over time, right? Now, at this point, we can just continue with the Holy Quran. But what we're going to do is we're going to say, okay, well, no, let's take a look at the second criterion as well, and let's apply it to the Old Testament and to the New Testament. Again, we're focusing on Old Testament because it's also considered to be the Jewish Bible, right? Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Now, when we look at the second criterion we said is that there's no contradiction. There has to be no contradiction in the message, right? There can't be any mistakes. There can't be any contradictory statements. Agreed? If you agree, say I agree. All right. So now, if we look into the Old Testament and we look at Genesis, the very first gospel, all right? In chapter 7, verse 1, what do we find? We find that it says, and the Lord said unto Noah. Here God is speaking to Nuh, Prophet Nuh. Okay, what does he say? He says, come thou and all thy house into the ark, right? The ark of Noah. Then he says, for thee have I seen righteous before me in the generation or in this generation. Okay? So what is he saying? He's saying Noah is the most righteous man in his generation. So by all standards, this sounds like something God would say about Noah, right? Because we believe Noah is a prophet of God. Now, since he is the most righteous, and God is saying he is the most righteous of his generation, then for sure we say, and we would all agree emphatically, that he is a prophet. Right, Brother Allah? Right? Yes? So we say, okay, this sounds godly. These are the words of God, without a doubt. Then we read on. We get to chapter 9, verses 21 to 25. And let me put the scenario together for you, okay? So in chapter 9, what happens is, now the chapter of Genesis is talking about when the Ark of Noah anchored, right? You know, it hit land, they anchored. What ended up happening? It says that, here it says, and when Noah began, so basically when the Ark of Noah landed, it said, and Noah became a husbandman and he planted a vineyard. Okay, so great. So he became a husbandman. That's good. Right, Brother Allah? It's good to be a husbandman, right? Today, Brother Allah is getting married. So صلوا على محمد وعلى محمد. But the next thing it says is, and he planted a vineyard. So that kind of causes us to scratch our heads. What do you mean planted a vineyard? Aren't vineyards for winemakers, right? So then what do we find? If we keep reading, it said, and he drank of the wine and was drunken. Huh? What do you mean? I thought he was the most righteous of his generation. How could he have drank from the wine and become drunk? And not only that, it says, and he was uncovered within his tent. Okay, so he's in his net. He's in his tent. So if he wants to, change his clothes, he wants to take his clothes off, that's okay. But he was drunk. Wal-'ayadhu billah, God forbid, the most righteous of of the generation at the time. This is a bit questionable, right? So what are we going to say? Automatically, we're going to say, okay, hang on. Well, let's say, for example, maybe someone will say to us, but who's to say that drinking was haram, was prohibited at that time, right? Somebody could come and say that to us, right? Am I right? So how do we respond to that? We say, well, hang on. Why don't we look at the Old Testament? Maybe in other places, it clarifies, right? And let's take a look at the New Testament as well, because we want to see, is this a contradiction or not? So when I look into the Old Testament and I go to Proverbs chapter 20, verse 1, what does it say? It says, wine is a mocker, and whomsoever is deceived is unwise. Okay. So wine makes a mockery out of a person. It humiliates the person who drinks it, right? So how could the most righteous of his generation allow a simple drink to make mockery out of him? That means that he's not wise, right? That he would allow a drink to deceive him? How does that make any sense? There's a contradiction here. That can't be the case. So we're seeing then the Bible here in the Old Testament is telling us wine is not good for you, right? Okay, well, is that the only verse? No. There's another verse, chapter 23 of Proverbs as well, in verses 20 to 21. What does it say? Do not be amongst wine bibbers, riotous eaters of flesh. Now, if we take the word among or amongst, what could it mean? Don't be around them. Don't be around people who drink, and they're wine bibbers, meaning that, they're known to drink and they drink so much that they spill it, right? They need bibs, right? So, A, don't be around people like that. Or B, don't be of these people, right? So then, again, the Old Testament is telling us it's bad to drink, not only to drink, but to be counted as being one of these individuals, or someone like them, or even being around them. And if you read verse 21 here of chapter 23, what does it say? For the drunkard and the glutton shall come to poverty, and drowsiness shall clothe a man with rags. Which means what? A person who drinks, right? What will happen to them? If they become an alcoholic, of course, right? What will happen to them? That person will end up, unfortunately, falling into poverty because they won't be able to work, right? And they'll be drowsy all the time. And what will happen? It says, and drowsiness shall clothe a man with rags, which means that they'll lose everything, right? And we know that if a person becomes an alcoholic, they lose their family, they lose their wealth, they'll lose their health, right? So this is clear. This makes sense. This is how we understand drinking alcohol as well. Now, if we move on and we look at Proverbs chapter 23, verse 32, what does it say? It says, Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. It says, at last it biteth like a serpent and stingeth like an adder. Which means what? Which means that alcohol, if you drink it, it takes a hold of you, wraps itself around you like a serpent, squeezes you into its arms, proverbially of course, and doesn't let you go. It strangles you, right? Just like a serpent. And it stingeth like an adder. Specifically, the adder is a very venomous snake, which means that it poisons you as well. And we know, for those of you who heard me the other day, I don't know if it was in the youth session or when we were talking, You know, my dad, God rest his soul and rest the soul of your dearly departed relatives, was a surgeon. He was a transplant surgeon, liver transplant surgeon. And I told you guys that he said, when I asked him, what is the major reason for liver cirrhosis, disease of the liver? He said, alcohol, because the liver can't process it. It's poisonous for the liver. And number two, what else? The ink from tattoos, okay? So then medical science then corroborates this biblical verse that what? That it stingeth like an adder, that it's venomous and poisonous for the human body. Okay, so far, we're not seeing anything good. So we're seeing that those verses of him being drunk, Noah being drunk, wal-'iyadhu billah, right, are not of the characteristics of a prophet. So now we have to look and see, is there anywhere else where it says, you know, a prophet, a righteous man is not allowed to drink? So now let's look at the New Testament, because we looked at the Old Testament. So what does the New Testament say? In the Gospel of Luke, in chapter 1, verse 15, here God is speaking about Yahya, Prophet Yahya. Okay, so what does it say? It says, for he shall be great in the sight of the Lord. How beautiful. Prophet Yahya, of course. And he shall be great in the sight of the Lord. Yes, we agree with that, right? We Muslims, we agree with that. It talks to my soul, right? A representative of God has to be perfect, right? So Allah has to see him as being righteous and great. And then what does it say? And shall drink neither wine nor strong drink. Which means that a representative of God, the most righteous of God's creations, are not allowed to drink wine or strong drink, which means any drink that has alcohol in it. You see? So that tells us then that there's an obvious contradiction, right? That no, drinking alcohol is prohibited in Christianity. It is prohibited in the Bible, the Jewish Bible, as well as, meaning the Old Testament and the New Testament. So how can someone accuse a prophet of God within the very Bible itself? That tells me somebody added something here. Someone is trying to cut the prophets of God and the representatives of God down to size so that they seem like they're regular human beings that can make mistakes and misguide people. And this doesn't sit right to the human intellect, right? Logic dictates that a representative of God would have to be perfect. Agreed? If you agree, say I agree. Because it's too dangerous. It would be detrimental to the message and to the guidance of humanity if that wasn't the case, right? Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Now, when we look at the Holy Quran, we don't find any contradictions in it. Now, tomorrow, inshallah, I will cover certain verses that some have brought up where they've said, oh, in the Holy Quran it says, kill the infidels, you know, meaning the disbelievers. And the word infidel doesn't exist in the Holy Quran, okay? And then they say, but it also says in the Holy Quran, he who kills one person has killed all of humanity, and he who saves one person has saved all of humanity. So how do we resolve that quote-unquote claimed contradiction? We'll have to look at the context of the verses to understand, right? And then we'll see that in reality there are no contradictions in the Holy Quran, okay? Until tomorrow, inshallah, we ask that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepts what little we offered. We give our congratulations to our dear brother Rida on his upcoming marriage, inshallah. We ask that Allah gives them tawfiq, inshallah, in all of their upcoming life together, bi'awnihi ta'ala. Wa akhiru da'wana an alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen, wa salatu wa salam ala sayyidil mursaleen, wal fatiha ala arwah al marhumin masbuqatan mashfu'atan.